Hello everyone, it's your favorite Scion Space here, and with Scion having so much powers that the players can, do in the whole character arc, it's easy to forget that Scion has a plethora of bad guys. I mean, technically speaking, it has villains from pretty much any mythology ever, so there's always stuff to draw from there. However, I think it's easy for the best villains to sometimes get lost in the sauce, so to speak, of just how much you could throw at the player. So for this video, I'm going to take what I consider to be the five best villains of Scion to use in games. You don't want to use them in, say, every game you run or whatever, as many of them are kind of like the big bad for your story, but I do believe these are all worth your attention. So let's begin. Now, the first big bad on the list is probably the most original, because I don't think it came from anything else or wasn't based on something else. So anyway, that being the Children of Theia from the Scion Mythos book. Specifically, you know that theory that Theia and a Proto-Earth crashed into each other to create like the moon and some other effects on the Earth and all that jazz? Yeah, well, all that in Scion, all that's true. And specifically, Theia was a giant planet-turned spaceship that a bunch of space alien autos were using to travel around the galaxy using their super science. However, due to a miscalculation, they crashed into the Proto-Earth, and most of them died, and the ones that survived were in a cryostasis waiting to wake up. Anyway, some of them were starting to wake up and not instantly die from being in the Earth's core or something, and their plot is actually pretty simple. They want to turn Earth into a giant spaceship and go back to what they were doing. Admittedly, some of this, I like them just for the pure absurdity and over-the-topness they are, but it's just so fun. I want to do something with them. However, they're kind of low on the list because, A, they do stretch the normal theming of Scion in a way that is just not, within the realms of general mythology Scion usually plays with. Even with Cthulhu stuff, it's kind of stretching it. They'd be just beyond what Cthulhu does, I mean. And second flaw is that they're, well, not a singular entity, they're a group, but the real second reason is that, fundamentally, their villain goals is really hard to work into a campaign that isn't specifically about trying to stop them from returning Earth to a spaceship. They lack some of the versatility that some of the other villains have. Like, sure, the other villains have solid, singular motivations for the most part, but there's different ways they could go about them and stuff like that. I feel like the Children of Theia are just a bit too limited into what they can do, and they don't work well with others necessarily. But they're so cool and kind of absurd that I think they totally deserve to be on the list. The next one, and holder of the fourth place, is the Loch Ness Monster from the Scion Dragon book. Now, she is a bit of an interesting case, as she is a kind of one of those pre-made examples they give of like, oh, things your Scion Dragon could be related to. But she is just so interesting. Oh, because, well, A, it's the Loch Ness Monster. I mean, it's kind of cool. Her lore, of course, pits her being one of the Lindworms against the Norse gods, specifically for the most part. And generally speaking, she, like all dragons, works through a web of manipulation and influence. However, you might say, well, all that sounds pretty standard, so what's the special sauce that makes her on this list and not just dragons in general? Well, what helps her stand out, A, it's the Loch Ness Monster, like I said previously, but because of extended lore you can play with the Loch Ness Monster, she's tied to the region of Loch Ness, which gives her mostly influence around the Scottish-English area. However, and you can always play more with this, there are other reports of creatures across that are like the Loch Ness across the world. You could easily imagine being her spies and influence. A whole web of intricate like Loch Ness monsters all weaving across the world for their plots and plans. And once again, kind of like the Children of Theia, it's just kind of cool. She's overall definitely probably out of all of those the most you have to workshop with, because she's not she has a singular end game, but not necessarily a goal, not necessarily a mission. So to craft her, you're gonna have to like really think of what you want to do with her. So that's why she isn't higher on this list. Going into third place, I'm putting Deus. Now, he is from the Scion God book, so I think he's probably going to be the least known of all these guys. And Deus is a bit of interesting because of the implications he has on Scion lore, probably more than any of the other people on this list. Yes, including the first one. His major deal is that he is based on the idea of the Proto-Indo-European religion. The idea that religions like the Greek pantheon, the Norse pantheon, the Hindu pantheon, etc., the few others in there thrown in there, all originally started from one religion. Deus being their kind of god, king, overlord, and big surprise, it's the same Deus here. However, they did tweak Deus a little bit here, is that though he is the former head of that pantheon, is that he was specifically the earliest version of Zeus. Although it's kind of weirdly explained of whether the current Zeus is effectively still just a version of him, or if Deus is more of a half-remembered reconstruction of the original Zeus, or how Zeus was before he, I guess, mellowed out some, because the Deus we have here is pretty much a full Titan, which I don't necessarily like, but I'll get into that. But anyway, Deus wants to, now that he's kind of reawoken in the Scion lore, specifically wants to regain his former glory and take control of the Greek and Hindu pantheon. So he's already topping up the big boys, and he's, once again, very powerful, and he can control a lot of influence because he's technically the original ruler of two of the major, biggest, and most powerful pantheons in the setting. Because in Scion, it's generally been loosely said that the Greek and Hindu pantheons were the most powerful, or at least with the most influence. That isn't a hard setting, although I believe in Scion 1 editions it was just straight up they were the two most powerful. But the thing is, if he has any influence or control, I don't know if he were to gain power over both of them, that would make him a devastating factor. Although, something I do wonder is kind of why isn't he, like, going after all the Indo-European religions? Like, we have other ones in the game. Why is he only after these two? Like, maybe only in Scion lore those two pantheons were originally one. And also, they don't really go into the implications of what this means much, because that should be some earth-shattering revelations about these two mostly different pantheons were one explicitly in Scion. I feel like there's a lot of implications they just kind of don't deal with because he's just kind of given a footnote. Maybe they'll expand on him later. Maybe he'll just be kind of one of those throwaway things and never come back to. I don't know, but he easily earns his third place. Just with the understanding that if you want to use him, his goals are simple, but how he's going to go about them is kind of like Loch Ness, where you're going to have to fill in a lot of the blanks. In second place goes to Mordred. Mordred. Now you might think in a thing with literal gods on the list, how is this boy, who in most legends was not even particularly powerful without getting magical artifacts, is even on this list? Well, the answer is simple, because he is a professional hater. I'm talking like Reverse Flash levels of professional hater. But in order to understand this, we're going to have to explain how Arthurian legend works in Scion, specifically because they have a bit of its own thing to it. To keep a long story short, the Arthurian myth in Scion is effectively a failed pantheon. Or more accurately, it should be a pantheon in the setting, but due to fate keep getting in the way, Arthur never ascends, the pantheon is never formed, and so it's left as a whole bunch of incomplete mantles incredibly fate-bound to each other. This has a lot of implications, mainly that people across all of history have either been trying to claim the title for themselves, were made as echoes of those things, or just straight-up reincarnations of these people trying over and over again to fulfill them. It's also worth saying that King Arthur may very well still be on ice somewhere on an island somewhere ready to do this whole thing to add even more chaos to the situation. This is where Mordred comes in. Now, it isn't explicitly stated that Mordred is always trying to destroy the kingdom. They try to, soften his image somewhat, but generally speaking, the role of Mordred is more of an antagonistic one, and definitely one that has probably caused the most amount of reasons this pantheon never fully got going out of any of them, probably all of them combined, honestly. And overall, that's a lot of destructive power. But how does that get you on the list? Because still, that's not professional levels of hater. No. The professional levels of hater, and the reason he gets the second place on this list is purely because of the pre-made adventures from the Arthurian Legends book, Once in the Future. Now, a little bit of a spoiler here, so just skip to a few minutes later, or just plug your ears for a minute. Anyway, basically, we learned that Mordred has been reincarnated like other ones, specifically trying to usurp the Pantheon and cause all kinds of chaos. This obviously is quite interesting, and we can actually kind of get a brief glimpse of what him winning would do, and you do not want that. It involves Europe all falling under a cloud of darkness as he ascends. So yeah, overall he has to be stopped if at all possible, and that's how he easily gets to second place. But there was one that's even above him. The final one to take the position, the number one big bad in Scion, in my opinion, has to go to the Prince from the Titanography book. I can never say that word right. And why do I think he's go here? Simply put, but I have a bit of a personal bias for him, and I explain why. And basically because I've ran several Scion games, one full campaign of it, and he is actually the only villain on this list I have personally ran. The other ones I only say are cool in theory. I know the Prince is cool in practice because he is fun. Because, now, to kind of summarize who the Prince is, you know that legend in Greek mythology about Zeus and his first wife Metis, and how they were fated to have 2 kids, one a daughter, one a son. The son would be stronger than Zeus and overthrow him, blah, blah, blah. And you know how, like, then he absorbed Metis, and, you know, Athena became the daughter, but the son never materialized in mythology? Yeah, the Prince is the son destined to overthrow Zeus and take his place on the leader of the Greek pantheon, which, he's a titan, or at least potential titan, could be, and that could cause a lot of problems in the overall balance, considered to the point that could straight be the star of the iconography in the setting, which is kind of like saying, oh, this one guy, if he takes the position, could cause the end of the world, or World of Darkness style Gehenna, that kind of stuff. Like, he's not just some personal drama of who takes position, right? And granted, they give him what little, and he was, you know, he somehow escaped he became mortal / Scion, and ended up getting into a position of power and wealth over the world, and is now trying to make more of a case, both mystical and political, that he should be ruling over the Greek pantheon, to the point that he will straight up try to do it in the pre-made adventure that he is the main antagonist of, question mark. Now, I'm kind of cheating here a little bit with him, because although I put him on the top 5 big bads list, how he actually came about in my game was actually a little bit special. Now, this is especially how I ran him, but now, when I ran the game of Scion that I was playing with, specifically, that the main idea is the players were trying to stop this cult of titans from kind of like overthrowing the world and all that jazz, starting chaos and all that jazz. What I didn't suspect is that the players were actually interested in hearing both sides out on this. So, when I realized that the players were actually trying to do it, I worked in to make it more of a morally gray situation with goods on both sides because that's what the players wanted. This led to the Prince going from this megalomaniac that just only wanted power to having some humanity in him. He was not perfect, he certainly was selfish, but he had some humanity to him that the players ultimately ended up enjoying out of him, to the point they actually helped him do it. I do admit I did kind of rehabilitate a lot of it to rework it, but I also consider the fact that if a villain has motivations so compelling that it makes the heroes at least want to imagine him being the good guy, or at least someone they could help out, I think it's kind of interesting too. And that's really, I think, one of the biggest strengths of him, is that he's, like, occasionally Scion tries to play with the idea that maybe the Titans aren't as bad as the gods say they are, and the gods aren't as good, but it never materializes as anything more than either a, no duh, the gods aren't perfect, or, oh, like, sorry that one of you wasn't actually quite as bad as all you others, but you still were pretty much idiots. It just never tends to manifest in a way I find interesting, but the Prince manages to actually do that. And of course, you can still run the Prince as a totally megalomaniac villain, or the tragic hero who just wants what is rightfully his, and there's a lot of structure you could say to having a villain that well built. Like, honestly, I say this quite a lot. If you looked at, like, the other villains in Scion, especially off this list, but even on this list, they're, like, normal supervillains, right? But the Prince easily, if it was, like, a story, could easily be ridden to the quality of, like, Batman villains, like the A tier, I think, if there was, like, if someone really wanted to dive into Scion and give it, like, a novel series or a comic book or something, which would be very cool. But overall, that's just my opinions. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts on, like, what is your favorite villain from Scion? Did the list make sense? What villains have you ran in Scion? It's like, you think are interesting? And overall, I just want to hear your thoughts down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.